What's going on, boys? Thanks to our patrons and Fiverr customers, subscribe to our Patreon free for behind-the-scenes stuff, arm yourselves, life stuff. A while ago, in the death walking video, the one in which I described this idea of death walking, which I realized sounds good because it sounds like sleepwalking, I referenced a psychic narrative fiction setting. And I was thinking about this setting, or imagining it, because I liked the way the vampire tabletop game plays, but I did not like the amount of work I was doing trying to get that system to accommodate the sort of game I wanted to play. Because if you're trying to play it like a game, that game system is not very gamey, it's uncooperative. And as much as I enjoy that game's universe and all of its lore and all that, including the stuff people seem not to like, the new stuff, I actually thought that was pretty clever what they were doing, whether or not it's intentional. That community gave me really bad vibes, and I would rather not be tied to something that gives me bad vibes, even if I don't need to interact with it directly, because I will need to interact with it while I'm trying to make shit work the way I want it to work. And with homebrewing, you reach a point. Are you homebrewing, or are you just making an unlicensed version of the game? And if it's the latter, then why not take those additional steps and go all the way? Make your own thing. And in the process, develop an experience or work with themes more suited to what you care about. And I like vampires' themes a lot, both in the gameplay and in the lore, but you have no say over how those things turn out, which is, I imagine, one of the reasons the vampire community, at least on the gameplay side, is in such a weird spot. So today I'll be talking about the psychic setting, what I'm calling for now the Little Gods of Men. Both as a universe, what I have so far, and some of the mechanical changes I'm going into. Which, really, there's not a ton to change, because the vampire game I was building was something completely different. It was all Oracle focused. And ever since I was, or high school I think was the last time I really did it, I've stopped engaging seriously with, quotes, world building projects. Those things aggravate me, or maybe better to say, I look down my nose at them, because most of the time, a world building project is all of the icing and none of the cake. I understand some people use world building projects to express their own mediums, like visual arts, or I was watching a fashion video, there's an entire clothing company that is a world building project, and they seem not to care that much about the actual lore of the world they're building. They're just using this project, as I said, to express themselves artistically through clothing. But most world building projects come out of writers who don't want to write or can't write. If you are a writing type person, I'm sure you have encountered, or probably have been, the sort of person who will have multiple notebooks filled with lore and species and world mechanics, governments, hundreds of pages of history, and not one narrative set in it. You've spent years putting together a wiki for something that doesn't exist and won't exist, or people won't get into it the way I think you'd like them to get into it, because you haven't set a narrative in it. And I'm talking to myself as much as I am to people who do this, because world building projects like that they're like opiates, or gooning, or anything like that. You are spending a lot of time on something that feels good, but after however many years, you realize you aren't getting anywhere. And then the reality of your situation starts strangling you. And it becomes harder and harder even to enjoy what you're doing because you're aware of the way things are not going. And the resentment I feel in this, not just the criticism and the self criticism, is the fact people are starting to like world building projects just for world building projects. And I'm guessing that's mostly a cultural evolution. Nobody's going to sit down to read a novel or even to play a long narrative game, but they are happy to read wiki articles while they are shitting. That's the reality. That is your audience. And I suppose that's fitting, but it leaves a terrible taste in my mouth. And I'm justifying this world building project to myself by attaching a game to it. At least it's something. And this game and its world, to me, is a meditation. It's a meditation on powerlessness. Update on my life situation, because it ties in. I mentioned it briefly a couple videos ago. From the moment I realized what was happening in mid-December, I had a feeling things would be, quotes, okay, but the way things were going down, I understood this was a torment with stakes. Stakes you need to take seriously, even if you think things are probably going to be okay, because you can brush anything off until you can't. And although the worst parts didn't get resolved, I started finally to relax again because I thought the pressure was easing up, but that's not the case. The game seems to have become, and it is a game, constant reminders of my powerlessness. You're too weak and too broke to have any say in anything, and this is the way things are going to stay. Now, things are not going to stay that way, but even if you have a plan, that doesn't mean you have options right now. Maybe you have a path to get options at some point, but right now, you don't. And even once you reach a point you have those options and can take them, you aren't allowed just to take them. It's not like choosing a meal off a menu. You have to cut off a finger to take them. And in this state, it's hard to commit to anything or to get serious about anything. Certainly not anything that might make you happy or generate lasting happiness, because when you are made to feel afraid for your lower needs on the hierarchy of needs, you can't get into the higher ones. Now, that hasn't stopped me from trying to enjoy things I can. This whole project that I've been kicking around between heart attacks is an example of that. But this situation, and it seems like you always end up in this situation. It might come in different forms, but this inability to exhale and stop bracing and worry about the things you care about or the things that mean anything to you. And knowing you're probably never going to have that opportunity. You will probably never be allowed just to relax and try to figure out how to be happy. So, with that setup, we step into the world that I have right now. I'd like to expand it, of the little gods of men. Around 5 years ago, most human beings committed suicide. And in fact, most complex life committed suicide. Not just people, animals. And then, immediately afterward, shit got a little quirky. The planet and its inhabitants all started getting a bit wacky. Like reality itself was having a panic attack, which it was and still is. Interlopers wearing human skin started arriving, and psychonauts with now heightened capabilities started probing, and in certain circumstances, some of these people sometimes could explain what might be going on. A scouring is coming to all that is. Existence, or the on position of the on off switch, won't be destroyed or deleted. More like perceiver and perceived are both under new management. Things might go on existing, but life, not just as you know it, but also as it can be known, will be scrambled, which might be worse than non existence, and that worseness might be even worse the more of this scrambling you are able to perceive. And that's terrible for us. It's even worse for higher beings with longer lives, more dimensions within which they exist, concerns, abilities to perceive beyond our understanding. So much worse it is for them. Now, according to reports from the other side, some higher beings are or will be making an effort to retain their way of life, retain their perception, keep this reality as it is, from the first dimension to the 30th, but they're losing, and when they lose big. Can you imagine how it would feel for you, a three-dimensional being, to live in a reality in which the third dimension gets obliterated? You might somehow continue to exist, but at that point, what is existence? You are forced to live a life or exist in a way you can't even imagine. And are they going to restructure the third dimension once it's been knocked over? Are they going to reinstate it? What does it mean to return to the third dimension after you've been forced into the second dimension? Is there going to be a completely different dimension? Are there levels to these dimensions? You're forced piecemeal into chaos. And as we mentioned, some gods, or quote gods of higher planes, incomprehensible to us existences, are fighting this, but they're losing. Others are not fighting it. These are what we call demons. They are retreating down the consciousness ladder. We used dimensions as an example before. That's not exactly what's happening. It's more like levels of consciousness are being toppled one by one. And these demons' idea is not to stand and fight. It is to retreat down that consciousness ladder into lower and lower abilities to perceive, presumably to a point they can no longer perceive. And to accomplish this, they are level by level of consciousness killing themselves so their souls can retreat into lower and lower forms. For our universe, that means dimensional or perceivy refugees, souls, are inhabiting soulless human bodies. And in this universe, most humans either have no souls, they're humans biologically, but they have not been inhabited by a quotes human soul yet, or maybe never will be, so they're just existing. Or their souls are not dense, they're wispy, and can be tossed out by much more powerful souls, which these souls fleeing downward are. Now, that's weird because soul and memory in this universe are not totally correlated or connected. So, for the last however many years, maybe it's 10 years, maybe 50, maybe hundreds, demon souls, higher souls, have been coming down and inhabiting human bodies to escape this consciousness reality scouring that is happening way up the ladder. But these souls don't remember, or at least they don't remember yet. They jump into these bodies and they go on living with that vessel's memories. So, superficially, very little changed when this first started happening. Maybe we could go wacky cuckoo with it and say it started happening 400,000 years ago when the human consciousness development shit really kicked off. That would be funny. But for a while, humans were safe vessels. And in fact, other animals on the planet were safe vessels too. I don't remember, I think it was an Extinct Zoo video that was saying we might actually be living in an intelligence explosion, evolutionarily speaking. These fleeing demons found a good refuge. This is a good planet, this is a good level of awareness, they're safe here. So they don't need to keep running down the ladder. They don't even need to remember and understand totally what's going on. Maybe some of them will have suspicions or intuitions sometimes about the actual nature of things, but housed in these containers, they're fine, mostly. And then reality suffered a really big loss. One that is too close to ignore. So close, the impact reminded these demons, these, if not body snatchers, then body inhabitors, that they are running, or have been running, were running for good reason, and they better get running now because they're running out of time. Holy shit, that was really close. And then most life on this planet killed itself. Now, I'm not implying most of humanity is made up of demons, but I am saying there were a lot of them, and when that huge chunk of humanity offed itself, a lot of other life went with it. Maybe they created a death gravity that other souls couldn't not, they were sucked in, and that's why they killed themselves. Maybe these demons prompted other beings with not exactly higher consciousness souls, but souls they liked, to come with them, grabbed their hands, and pulled them out of the burning house. It's not totally clear what happened. All that is sort of clear is generally what triggered this event, and that it changed humanity as a species, Earth as a planet, fundamentally. So now demon souls are less present, because this is no longer a refuge. This is a rung on the ladder. This is not the safe ground to stand on. So you're seeing fewer demons. Yet, demons are still unnerving, especially considering the fact now they are really freaked out. You could be married to someone for 10 years, wake up one day, realize they're feeling different and they're looking at you differently. Things go on normally for a few days as this odd feeling builds. And then your spouse realizes that they are, well, your spouse is no longer your spouse. Technically, they're kind of your spouse because they have your spouse's memories, but actually, they've been inhabited by a demon's soul, and they need to kill themselves. Holy shit, do you have any idea what's going on out there? We need to get the fuck out of here. Which maybe makes sense to that soul, but it doesn't make total sense to you. You're a human. All you know is human. So again, the life you wanted to lead or were hoping to lead has been ripped away from you. And you can't keep it. You can't do anything to protect it, it's already gone. All you can do is decide what you want to do next, wondering all the while if it even matters. Does making any decision matter? And in terms of mood or vibes, that is the state of humanity at the moment in this world. Transience, liminality, terror. The remaining humans are clinging to anything resembling a normal, stable life, a stable reality, existence. But that is increasingly less possible. Because now nobody feels safe. And they're starting to act accordingly. And even if they are trying to act like they can be safe, which they can't, they're aware they can't. Because the basics of their reality are starting to warp too. Not to mention the fear that they might wake up and realize they are no longer themselves. Or what happens when a demon takes over a body from a weaker soul? Who knows? That soul's gone. These days, in some cases, when a demon becomes aware of what's going on and that it is a demon, it doesn't always immediately kill itself. Sometimes its human memories take over or are more important to it. It can't deny what it is. It can't deny that on some level it's aware of what's going on, but it also doesn't want to sacrifice what it has now. So you have these demons that think they're people and are wielding psychic powers over other people in an attempt to live some kind of satisfying life on this plane. And that's dangerous. Not only because they do fucked up stuff, but also because their souls drain more fuel once they wake up out of sleep mode. If you're hibernating or operating on or with fewer functions like the Voyager probes or something like that, you don't need to expend as much energy. But once you activate these functions, which once you activate them, you can't deactivate them, you can't make yourself forget once you've remembered, there's a large power drain and something needs to feed that. That something is going to be other people's consciousnesses, their souls. So if a demon chooses not to kill itself, then it must, to continue existing in our world with an awareness of what it is and its powers, it must feed on people. And maybe they're playing conservatively, they need to eat only one soul per month. But then you have others who could consume hundreds of souls in a day and are inclined to do so because they're terrified and want to build up their power and try to do something. What are they going to do? Who knows? Probably nothing. There's nothing you can do. But they're so afraid they are no longer acting rationally, and they have the power to make that sort of irrationality very dangerous. So they need to be dealt with. Now, in the same way, on this crossroads intersection that is Earth and humanity, there are lower consciousnesses reaching up, climbing the ladder, trying to get higher so they can get into the fight. Thinking about it a different way, if a demon is like a person who transfers their consciousness into an ant, lives as an ant for a while, remembers that it used to be a human and became an ant because it needs to go lower, and then kills itself so it can keep going lower. These other things, I'm calling them creatures right now. I haven't come up with a good word for them. I don't want to use anomalies because that word is starting to get overused, even though I like it a lot. These creatures are like the equivalent of you're sitting at your desktop, fucking around on your computer. You have an ant farm on your desk. One of the ants expands into the size of an SUV and goes anthropomorphic somewhat and is bleeding acid all over the place, and it's screaming, you're screaming, it doesn't understand you, you don't understand it, and then it keeps growing until it explodes and gets soaked into the fabric of reality like a mist. That's what these things are. Lower consciousnesses rapidly and violently growing into higher consciousnesses, feeding on shit along the way with no understanding of what they're really looking at because they aren't focused on these higher planes they reach. They are focused on building momentum and crashing into whatever the problem is on the highest plane. Anyone they step on along the way be damned. Those things also need to be dealt with. Except that's a little spookier or a little trickier because if you exterminate these things, you are effectively exterminating soldiers fighting on your side. But it depends on what you mean by your side. If by your side you mean reality as it exists now, then yes, they are on your side. If you mean your life as you know it, then no, they are a huge traumatic threat to your side. Because to preserve reality, these things are willing to smash your reality. At least as long as they need to be on our plane, in our neck of the woods. So now we come to humanity's two responses to everything that's going on. On the first level, we have what I'm calling agents, or more properly, they would be called psychics. I use agents because the gameplay loop is centered around operating on behalf of an agency trying to keep the status quo as status quo-y as it can be kept, which is becoming almost impossible. But certainly not all psychics are doing this. Some of them are acting like or operating like demons, terrified, wielding their power, trying to gain power to make themselves feel more secure of something that is almost assuredly already lost. And if there were a way to save it, this is not the way to go about doing it, but fear is a hell of a drug. So, between the presence of demons and humanity's own psychic potential, this sort of psychic shit has always been around on some level. However, following whatever collapse happened up above, and then the mass culling of life in terror, and the warping of reality, the aftershocks, psychic potential awakened a lot more. And I'm not sure if this is a call to arms from higher beings, or if it's like reality triggering its own white blood cells, but humanity's psychic potential has been activated. Hyperactivated. But this wasn't supposed to happen yet. So it's like 5-year-olds carrying around battle rifles. Maybe they can use them technically, but morally and practically they really shouldn't. But considering the situation, there isn't really another option. So while most humans continue to be base humans, there's a large number of humans who either self-activated or have been activated into psychic power, and they can do with it what they will. Most player characters in this tabletop setting would be operating for this agency that employs psychics and others, but mostly psychics, to deal with demons, these creatures, and any number of other weird psychic phenomena, psychic threats. However, there are issues. It's like putting too much energy into a battery. The more psychically active or capable a soul becomes, the less capable their body is of housing that soul. And in the same way, the moment you're born, your your time starts running out, your fuse starts burning. It's like that with psychics, except it's happening a lot faster. You are dying. Not because of entropy and old age, but because your body can't handle your soul. So, keeping with the theme, even if psychics become more powerful once they're activated, they won't live long enough really to enjoy their power. Once they cross a certain threshold, they die outright. They start death walking, which is described in the death walking video. They kill themselves, or they lose their minds and become threats until they die or are put down by other psychics. And of course, if they want to buy themselves more time, they need to consume other human souls or their feed off their consciousness clouds, killing them or vegetabilizing them. And even if that reduces some of the present strain, it's like one step forward, two steps back, because they put themselves that much closer to imploding. It reminds me of last year when I was stuck in the situation that I am paying taxes on money that I need to use to pay taxes. What is that? You're just in a series of no wins. There's no way out of this. And if you don't want to kill yourself and join the demons, which maybe you don't, probably you don't, you shouldn't, because even some demons, once they remember what they are afraid of committing suicide. Because it's not clear in our language exactly what happens. All anybody knows is that for humans, suicide is not a guaranteed way out. The reason demons are pulling this off, these soul shenanigans, is they come from so far up the ladder, they have a lot more control over where they go. But even for them, that's not a certainty, and they are master reality benders. Humans are just now really getting into the reality manipulation game. So unless you are super confident, super brave, or super stupid, you just have to ride it out until the choice is made for you. And in the meantime, you can either succumb to the madness and lose your mind about the pressure and the terror and the change and the chaos and the torture, or you can try to or contribute to trying to keep things normal here for as long as you can if you want to. Or you can just run off into the woods and try to survive your own way, but you're fucked no matter what you do. That is, unless you are a hyperpsychic. What I've been calling in my head smileys. And smileys are where the title comes from. Smileys are the little gods of men. A little while ago we mentioned the lower existence, lower consciousness creatures speedrunning their way to the end game up the consciousness ladder. Smileys are the human version of that. Psychics capable not just of manipulating reality on this plane, but also of growing into higher planes. So the way I imagine Smileys working is these are hyperpsychic individuals whose human bodies and in fact entire existences on this level of consciousness act as seeds at first and then as regulation organs later. Smileys evolve up into higher planes, into higher creatures. And we can feel the effects of their evolution. They're part of the reason why the world is getting so wacky. But to look at them, they just look like mildly disabled people who smile a lot. And with them, I imagine their existence It's a matter of focus. Imagine you are operating some Ghost in the Shell ass computer with 75 monitors and 6 keyboards, but then you have one little monitor the size of your pinky nail with Pong playing on it off to the side, and someone tells you that's the one that's important. That's what you need to pay attention to while you are surrounded by all this advanced shit and needing to do all these advanced things. No, that's not. None of that is what you should really be paying attention to. It should be this itty bitty little monitor with this basic ass game playing on it. That's how they see us and how we see them. Their human body exists basically just to remind them that they started as a human. So when we're dealing with a smiley on the human plane, they'll interact with us, they'll talk, they'll hold multiple conversations, they're rather smart, but as high a level as we perceive them to be operating on, they look detached, they look out of it, because to them, they are out of it. They are still here with us only out of obligation. And it's not really obligation, it's sentimentality. Most smileys, upon ascending, kill their human forms so they don't need to be restrained by what they were. And they can focus on what they're trying to become, so they'll have a better chance of dealing with whatever is going on at the highest levels. The ones who maintain their human bodies, it's out of sentimentality. They think it's, well, it's not just sentimentality, they think it's important. Maybe they want to come back at some point, probably not. Maybe they need to remember what they're fighting for. It's not exactly clear. That's why, even though a psychic ascending into smileyhood is not the most uncommon thing in the world, sticking around is. And the ones who do stick around lend their aid, and their aid is substantial, but no longer is their primary concern this plane of existence, and even if they wanted to pay attention to it, that monitor is so small and that game is so simple, they aren't tuned to perform well on this plane. Which is why you have agents doing most of the heavy lifting, because they are still tuned to this reality, and there are more of them. But some of them aren't so friendly, and where most of these unfriendlier ones would kill themselves so they no longer have to be human, it's like cutting out a little itty bitty organ that they hate. No, some of them are a little more spiteful, and they stick around to make things a lot worse, and they're able to do it. And these few become another threat that needs to be dealt with. Except these ones are dangerous, perhaps the most dangerous of all the threats, even though all the threats are doing consciousness shit and are very dangerous, because they have feet in both worlds. They are now at a higher level, but they remember what it's like to be a human, and they can make things very bad using that knowledge. Demons are dangerous, but they are no longer higher beings. They are higher, or they're our level beings with the resonance of what they were. Nasty smileys are human and God, which is a disturbing concept to me. The tribunal in Morrowind is so disgusting and horrifying. You don't want your gods to resemble you at all. Because if your gods understood what they were governing, the way you understand yourself and your species, it would be very bad for everybody. Could you imagine Joe Dipshit, your neighbor, developing godlike power? Just some fucking guy. Horrific. And then finally, a brief description of the planet and the species as it is now on that quotes normal level. The weather has gotten freaky and supernatural. The animals, the ones that remain, are acting freaky and supernatural. Not all of them. Not all the weather is supernatural, not all the animals are supernatural, but things are not operating the way they're supposed to. Humanity at large, what remains of it, responds to these terrifying circumstances in different ways. Some congregate in cities, others try to make lives for themselves alone, but there's a lot of space that nobody really knows what to do with now. It's like the planet has become a graveyard. Everybody remembers why the planet became a graveyard, but there's this noospheric stain around it. As in, everybody knows what happened. People generally have an idea of why it happened, but people don't often think about it or talk about it. It's like this thing that devastated life as you know it and indicates the end of everything as it can be known. Everybody knows what happened, but nobody will address it, or they rarely do. It's like an existential trauma. You are never getting away from it, but there's also no way to deal with it, so people just try not to think about it. Even though you can't not think about it everywhere you look, because that event made existence is what it is now. All that's left for the species, the majority of the species, is to sit and wait and think about what's happened if you can bear it, and fear what's coming and you can do nothing about. So I said in the beginning, I want this to be a meditative experience, this game. And this video is already really long, so I won't get deep into mechanics, but I want to cover some of the most important ones. Most of the time you'll be playing an agent, a contractor psychic who gets paid to go out and deal with these supernatural situations that base level humans can't. But to use your powers, you have two stats, but they're the same stat: strain and static. When using your powers or encountering certain phenomena, you develop strain from 0 or 1 to 100. There's no 0. This is the strain it takes to keep your shit together. If you exceed 100 strain, you gain 5 static. However, you can choose to feed on another person's soul or their consciousness and kill or vegetabilize them, and you'll reset your strain meter, but you'll still gain 1 static. Static is the mental, emotional, spiritual consequence of dealing with the strain. And I forgot to mention, at certain intervals, you'll be forced to roll on a D100, and if what you roll is lower than your highest strain or static count, you gain another static. So, I mean, it starts from the moment you start playing the game, but as long as you continue playing, you will eventually find yourself in a situation you cannot stop yourself from spiraling. You are constantly building this static meter, slowly at first, that, unlike your strain, you can't undo. And static could represent any number of things, but I interpret it generally as one's growing inability to be a human being. The longer you exist, the more you deal with, whether you win or lose, the less able you are to be what a human being is supposed to be. And then, once you exceed or reach or exceed 100 static, you cease to be able to be a human entirely. And your character, you lose control of your character. Either they kill themselves, die outright, start death walking, or become a threat to others. I think we talked about this earlier in the video. eventually you reach a point you just can't do it anymore. And you can't say for certain what's going to happen when you reach that point, but you know you will reach that point, and there's no going back from it once you're there. And if you're playing the game, you are always moving to that point. Your character's death is built into the mechanics. And not just death, but a complete breakdown resulting from existing. And ideally, this process will happen slowly. And at first, it is designed to happen slowly. You aren't supposed to get to that cascade level until later. You're playing long enough to get attached, you have enough leeway to have time to get invested. And maybe you play conservatively from the beginning, maybe you don't. But eventually, you'll realize you are attached to this narrative, to this character you're playing. Except now, you are close to death. And even if you're playing conservatively, you're just swirling down the drain and there's no way out of it. Your only option, desperate to have more time, is to stop using your abilities, and but that's, you use your abilities because you need them. Stopping using them will get you killed faster than continuing to use them will. There's just no way out. And from my experience playing my homebrew version of Vampire, bashing a bunch of shit together and writing a bunch of my own shit, you can develop very nice, meaningful narratives by yourself using RNG. Randomly generated stories and people you give a lot of a damn about. And that's what I want to go hard in on. Not just to enjoy these narratives, but specifically to enjoy watching or the realization dawning on you, even though you're aware of it from the very beginning. This narrative, these people, these activities will be ripped away from you, and there's nothing you can do about it. The universe's themes are built into the mechanics, or the most important mechanic. And the reason I say this is meditative is it forces you to consider what in the game you're afraid of losing. Not just forcing you to dread, but forcing you to think about what that dread is, why it is, what it means. And I'm not exactly sure what this meditation will do, but pretty is the word that's on my mind. And not exactly in the art ho way. Pretty in the sense, if you're afraid of losing it, then it mattered to you. No solution, no salvation was the best slogan that ever came to us in a dream. It's the application of nihilism to make a case in point argument against nihilism without there needing to be a happy ending, because I don't think there will be one. You don't need to have a happy ending for things to have mattered to you. And that's where I draw the line between the distinction line between whatever we are and art hoes. It's not about something being beautiful because it doesn't last. It is instead, more importantly, about the fact that something matters to you even though it doesn't last. Permanence and importance are not the same thing, and we live in a sad world in which we have to learn that lesson a sad way. Anyway, I'm in the process of putting together some rules. I don't imagine it'll be that difficult to draw up some sets of oracles and to get something working in a working order. and then we can start fleshing it out a lot more. The core gameplay loop needs to put the player in situations they want the powers that are going to kill them, or they need to use the powers that are going to kill them. Or put them in situations they need to take wounds faster. Because statistically, they're going to be taking these wounds, developing this strain and static, no matter what they do. But the pain comes from watching that time speed up. That loop needs to be polished so well. They're having so much fun, or they're so engaged with the mechanics, they don't realize death is creeping up on them in that way. And to do that, you need to make that loop very engaging. I will keep you posted. Maybe one day we will do a gameplay session of it, like that guy who has the vampire solo, Tourniquet is what it's called. On his channel, he has videos of himself playing Tourniquet to demonstrate the way it works, and for fun. Maybe we'll do the same thing. It's devastating realizing how much my nasty little life means to me, and how badly I don't want to lose it. It's maximally gruesome. Like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you haven't.